After the consultation, my phone buzzed. It was the doctor, terrified. "Leave the house immediately, don't come back." I was paralyzed. My daughter Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, watching me with those cold blue eyes I no longer recognized. The same eyes that once looked at me with pure love now held something that made my blood freeze. Can you imagine receiving a warning like this about your own home, the place where you raised your children with love and devotion? What would you do if your own daughter became the greatest threat to your life? I remained silent, holding that phone, but I already knew that the next day, my response would forever change both our destinies. My name is Sophia Rockwell. I am 62 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a respected forensic accountant who had built a solid career unraveling corporate frauds for the FBI. I retired early to take care of my ailing husband James, dedicating my final years to family. I thought I deserved some peace after 30 years of serving justice, but what I discovered in my own home would be worse than any case I had investigated in my entire career. It all started 3 weeks earlier, when I began feeling constantly dizzy and nauseous. At first, I attributed it to stress from James's death 2 months ago. The grief was overwhelming, and Emma had been so attentive, so caring, bringing me homemade meals every day, insisting I needed to eat to maintain my strength. "Mom, you're getting so thin," she would say, stroking my graying hair with apparent affection. "You need to take better care of yourself." The irony is brutal when I think about it now. My own daughter, stroking my hair while slowly poisoning me. The dizziness got worse. I started having memory lapses, moments of confusion that terrified me. Was I developing dementia? Was this what happened to people who lost their life partners after 40 years of marriage? Emma seemed increasingly concerned, suggesting that maybe it was time to consider assisted living. "Mom, I found this wonderful place," she said one afternoon, showing me brochures for expensive care facilities. "You'd be much safer there, and I could visit you every day." Something in her tone bothered me. There was an urgency that didn't match the loving concern in her words. My forensic instincts, dormant but not dead, began to whisper warnings I didn't want to hear. But it was Dr. Martinez's call that changed everything. He had insisted on running additional blood tests when I mentioned my symptoms during a routine visit. What he found in my bloodstream made him call me immediately, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and terror. "Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said, his words cutting through my confusion like a blade. "The tests show traces of antifreeze in your blood. Someone has been poisoning you systematically. This is attempted murder." The world stopped. The kitchen where I was standing, where I had prepared thousands of meals for my family, where Emma brought me daily meals prepared with such apparent care, suddenly became a crime scene. "Are you sure?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Dr. Martinez had been our family physician for over 20 years. He would never make such an accusation lightly. "I'm calling the police now," he continued. "But Sophia, if someone has access to your food, to your house, you're in immediate danger. Leave, now." I hung up the phone with trembling hands and looked around my kitchen. The same hands that now shook with terror had caressed Emma's face when she was a baby, had held her during nightmares, had applauded her achievements. The same daughter who was now slowly killing me. Emma appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, as if she had been listening. She was holding another one of her special meals, chicken soup, that she claimed would help me regain my strength. "Who was on the phone, Mom?" she asked, and for the first time, I noticed something I had overlooked before. There was no genuine concern in her eyes. There was only calculation. "Dr. Martinez," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just routine results." She smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile I remembered from her childhood. It was the smile of someone who thought they had everything under control. "That's good. Now eat your soup while it's hot. I made it with so much love." I looked at that bowl of soup and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. How many times had she brought me meals in recent weeks? How many times had I thanked her for being such a dedicated daughter? That night, while Emma thought I was sleeping, I heard her on the phone in the living room. Her voice was different, colder, more businesslike. "Yes, it's working perfectly. She's getting weaker every day. The doctor thinks it's natural aging combined with grief. A few more weeks, and we can proceed with the commitment proceedings." My heart stopped. Commitment proceedings. She wasn't just trying to kill me. She was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent first. I understood then that this wasn't just about murder. It was about money. James had left me everything: the house, the investments, the life insurance. Emma knew that if I died naturally, she would inherit everything anyway. But if I was declared mentally incompetent first, she could control everything while I was still alive, trapped in an institution, aware of my situation but powerless to do anything. It was a plan of breathtaking cruelty and intelligence. My daughter wasn't just trying to kill me, she was trying to torture me first. That night, lying in the bed where James and I had shared 40 years of marriage, I made a decision that would define the rest of this story. I would not be a victim. I was Sophia Rockwell, a woman who had spent 3 decades unraveling crimes and bringing criminals to justice. My daughter had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated who she was dealing with. The next morning would begin my counterattack. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The fog that had been clouding my mind was lifting, and I understood why. I hadn't eaten Emma's caring dinner the night before. For the first time in weeks, my body was beginning to detoxify. I had to be smart about this. One wrong move and Emma would know I was onto her. So I did what any good investigator does. I started gathering evidence. While Emma was at her job at the marketing firm downtown, I began my investigation in my own home. The place that had been my sanctuary for 20 years suddenly felt like a crime scene, and I was both the victim and the detective. I started with the kitchen. Using the forensic techniques I had learned during my FBI training, I carefully examined every container, every spice jar, every bottle. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Hidden behind the baking soda, in a small, unmarked bottle, was a clear liquid. I didn't need laboratory tests to know what it was. The sweet smell was unmistakable. Ethylene glycol. Antifreeze. My hands trembled as I held that bottle. This was the weapon my daughter had chosen to kill me. Not a gun, not a knife, but something slow and torturous that would make me suffer while appearing to be natural aging. But the antifreeze was just the beginning of what I discovered that day. I went to James's old office, which Emma had been organizing since his death. What I found there made my blood freeze in a way that had nothing to do with poison. Our safe was open, not broken into, opened with the combination that only James and I knew. Inside, our important documents were missing. The deed to the house, our investment portfolios, James's life insurance policies. Everything was gone. But Emma had made a mistake. She had taken the originals, but left behind some photocopies James had made. As I examined them, I realized the scope of her plan was far more extensive than I had imagined. There, in James's careful handwriting, were notes he had made shortly before his death, notes I had never seen before. Emma asked again about the will today. She seems very interested in the details of the inheritance. Something in her tone worries me. Making appointment with lawyer tomorrow to add protection clause. My heart stopped. James had suspected something. My husband, in his final days, had sensed that our daughter was planning something. I flipped through more pages and found something that made me sit down hard in his leather chair. A bank statement from an account I didn't know existed. An account in Emma's name that showed regular deposits of $5,000 over the past 6 months. The deposits had started exactly when James's health began declining rapidly. $5,000 monthly. Where was Emma getting this money? Her salary at the marketing firm was decent, but modest. There was no way she could be saving this amount, unless she was already accessing our accounts somehow. I rushed to our bedroom and opened James's laptop, which Emma had said was too old to be useful and had left untouched. Thank God for her arrogance. James's email was still open, and what I found there confirmed my worst fears. In his sent folder, I found messages to our lawyer, Dr. Patterson, and even a private investigator. The email to Dr. Patterson, sent just 2 days before James's death, was devastating. Doctor, I need to ask you something confidentially. Emma has been very insistent about my medication schedule lately. She brings my pills personally and watches to make sure I take them. This started about a month ago, and since then, my condition has worsened rapidly. Is it possible that my medication could be tampered with? I know this sounds paranoid, but a father's intuition is telling me something is very wrong. Dr. Patterson's response was even more chilling. James, your concerns are not paranoid at all. The rapid decline in your condition has been puzzling me too. I think we should run some additional tests and perhaps consider changing your medication routine. Can you come in tomorrow without Emma knowing? But James never made it to that appointment. He died that night. I sat there staring at the screen, pieces of a horrible puzzle finally coming together. Emma hadn't just been slowly poisoning me. She had been slowly killing her father too. My daughter was not just a murderer. She was a serial killer who had already succeeded once. The phone rang, making me jump. It was Emma. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today? I was thinking of bringing you that chicken soup again for lunch. You seemed to enjoy it so much yesterday. Her voice was so sweet, so caring. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have been touched by her thoughtfulness. That would be lovely, dear, I replied, keeping my voice steady. You're such a good daughter. I'll be there in an hour. Make sure you're hungry, okay? I want you to eat every drop. After I hung up, I sat in James's chair for a long moment, feeling the weight of what I had discovered. My daughter had killed her father and was now trying to kill me. And she was doing it all with a smile, with hugs and kisses, with apparent love and devotion. But Emma had underestimated something crucial about me. I wasn't just any victim. I was a forensic accountant who had spent decades tracking financial crimes and unraveling the most complex fraud schemes. I had tools and resources she couldn't even imagine. More importantly, I now knew exactly what she was doing and how she was doing it. The element of surprise was no longer hers. It was mine. I spent the next 45 minutes methodically documenting everything I had found. I photographed the antifreeze bottle, copied James's emails to a secure drive, and recorded a detailed video testimony of everything I had discovered. When Emma arrived with her poisoned soup, I was ready. You look much better today, Mom, she said, studying my face carefully. More alert. I feel stronger, I replied truthfully. Maybe I'm finally starting to recover from losing your father. Something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment? Concern that her plan wasn't working fast enough? Well, this soup will help even more, she said, setting the bowl in front of me. I put extra love into it today. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time saw her for what she truly was. Not the little girl I had raised with infinite love, but a cold-blooded killer who was using that love as a weapon against me. Emma, I said softly, I need to ask you something. She looked up, alert. Of course, Mom. What is it? Do you remember what your father used to say about justice? She frowned slightly. What do you mean? He always said that the truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how well hidden it is. That justice might be delayed, but it's never denied. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear? Suspicion? That's a beautiful thought, Mom, she said carefully. Dad was always so wise. Yes, he was. And he taught me that the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who appear most trustworthy, the ones who use love as a disguise. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Emma was studying my face now, trying to determine if I knew something or if I was just rambling like an old woman. I picked up the spoon and brought it to my lips, then paused. You know what? I'm not as hungry as I thought. Maybe I'll save this for later. Mom, you really need to eat, she insisted, and for the first time, there was an edge to her voice. You're getting too thin. Please, just a few spoonfuls. Later, sweetheart. I promise. After she left, clearly frustrated, I poured the soup down the drain and began the next phase of my plan. If Emma wanted to play games with poison and deception, she was about to discover that her mother had learned a few tricks during 30 years of investigating criminals. The hunter was about to become the hunted. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I put on my best suit, did my makeup with precision, and walked into the offices of Morrison & Associates, the law firm that had handled our family's legal affairs for over 15 years. Margaret Morrison looked surprised to see me. The last time we had met was at James's funeral, where I had been a broken widow barely able to speak coherently. Sophia, what a pleasant surprise. You look remarkably well. I'm feeling much better, Margaret. Grief has a way of clarifying what's truly important. What I didn't tell her was that stopping the daily ingestion of antifreeze had restored not just my physical health, but my mental sharpness. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. And myself was someone who had spent 3 decades hunting down criminals. I need to discuss some concerns about my estate planning, I said, settling into the leather chair across from her mahogany desk. And I need to do it with absolute confidentiality. Margaret's expression grew serious. She had worked with me long enough to recognize when I was operating in professional mode. Of course, what's troubling you? I have reason to believe someone is attempting to manipulate my estate, someone with intimate access to my personal information and financial documents. I watched Margaret's face carefully as I spoke. Her eyes widened slightly. She knew immediately who I was talking about, even though I hadn't mentioned Emma's name. Sophia, that's a very serious allegation. Do you have evidence? Instead of answering directly, I pulled out a folder I had prepared. Inside were photocopies of the bank statements I had found, printed emails from James's account, and a detailed timeline I had constructed of Emma's suspicious behavior. I spent this morning doing what I do best, Margaret, following the money trail. As Margaret reviewed the documents, her expression grew increasingly grave. Finally, she looked up at me with the same respect I remembered from our professional interactions years ago. This is comprehensive and deeply troubling. Sophia, if these allegations are correct, we're not just talking about financial manipulation. We're potentially talking about murder. I know exactly what we're talking about. The question is, what can we do about it legally? Margaret leaned back in her chair, her legal mind already working through the implications. First, we need to protect your assets immediately. I can implement an emergency protection protocol that will freeze any attempts to access your accounts or change beneficiaries. Second, we need to involve law enforcement. This goes far beyond civil law. Not yet, I said firmly. I need more evidence before we bring in the police. Right now, it's all circumstantial. A good defense attorney could explain away most of what I've found. Margaret nodded slowly. You're thinking like an investigator, not a victim. What do you need from me? I need you to help me set a trap. Over the next hour, we developed a strategy that would have made my old FBI colleagues proud. Margaret would prepare new estate documents that appeared to give Emma even more control over my affairs. Documents that Emma would inevitably try to access. But hidden within the legal language would be clauses that would actually protect my assets and create an electronic trail of any unauthorized access attempts. It's brilliant, Margaret said, as we finalized the details. If she takes the bait, she'll provide us with undeniable evidence of her intentions. She'll take the bait. Greed makes people careless. As I left Margaret's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. For too long, I had been Emma's victim, dancing to her tune without even knowing the music was playing. But the game had changed. My next stop was downtown, to an office building I knew well from my FBI days. The building where my former colleague, Detective Ray Sullivan, now worked as a private investigator. Ray looked up from his desk with surprise and genuine pleasure when I walked into his cluttered office. Sophia Rockwell, I heard about James. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Ray. But I'm not here for condolences. I need your professional services. Ray's demeanor shifted immediately. He had worked with me on enough cases to recognize when I was in investigative mode. What's going on? I spent the next 30 minutes laying out the situation for Ray, showing him the same evidence I had shared with Margaret. Ray's reaction was even stronger than the lawyer's. Jesus, Sophia. Your own daughter? Are you absolutely sure about this? The evidence speaks for itself. But I need more. I need surveillance. I need financial records that I can't access myself. And I need someone watching my back while I gather what we need for a prosecution. Ray leaned forward, his weathered face serious. You know I'll help you however I can. But Sophia, this is dangerous. If she's already killed once and is working on a second murder, what do you think she'll do if she realizes you're onto her? That's exactly why I need professional backup. Emma thinks she's dealing with a grief-stricken old woman whose mind is going. She has no idea she's actually dealing with a forensic accountant who has put away dozens of criminals. Ray smiled grimly. Okay, I'm in. What's the plan? We spent another hour developing a comprehensive surveillance and investigation strategy. Ray would begin immediately monitoring Emma's activities, her communications, and her financial transactions. He would also provide me with discreet personal protection, something Emma would never notice, but that would keep me safe if the situation escalated. There's something else, I said, as our meeting wound down. I think Emma might have been accessing my computer and email. I need to know what she's been looking at and what information she might have compromised. I can have a cybersecurity specialist check your systems tomorrow. If she's been snooping, we'll find evidence of it. As I drove home that evening, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced since my retirement. The intellectual challenge of unraveling a complex crime, the methodical gathering of evidence, the careful construction of a legal strategy. This was what I had been born to do. Emma was waiting for me when I got home, sitting in the living room with another one of her caring meals prepared. "Mom, where were you today? I was worried when you weren't here for lunch." "I had some errands to run, dear. Estate planning things. Your father always handled those matters, and I'm trying to get organized." I watched her reaction carefully. There was definite interest, perhaps even excitement in her expression. "That's smart, Mom. It's important to have everything in order. Did you need any help with the paperwork?" "Oh, you're so sweet to offer, but it's mostly boring legal documents. I met with Margaret Morrison today to update some things." Emma's eyes sharpened. "Margaret Morrison? What kind of updates?" "Just making sure everything is current. You know, beneficiary information, power of attorney documents, that sort of thing." "Power of attorney?" Emma's voice was carefully casual, but I caught the undercurrent of intense interest. "Yes, well, at my age, it's important to have someone who can make decisions if I become incapacitated." The word hung in the air between us. Emma was trying very hard to appear only mildly interested, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "That's very wise, Mom. Have you thought about who you'd want to have that responsibility?" "Well, you're my only child. It would naturally be you, wouldn't it?" For just a moment, Emma's mask slipped, and I saw something in her expression that confirmed everything I had suspected. Not love, not concern for my welfare, but pure calculation. She was already imagining how she would use that power of attorney. "I would be honored to help you with those decisions when the time comes," she said softly. "You know I only want what's best for you." "I know, sweetheart. I know exactly what you want." After she left that evening, I sat in James's chair and reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, I had been a victim, slowly dying without even understanding why. Today, I was back to being what I had always been, a hunter. Emma had spent months carefully constructing what she thought was the perfect crime. She had killed her father, was slowly killing her mother, and had positioned herself to inherit everything while appearing to be a devoted daughter. But she had made one crucial error. She had assumed that grief and poison had destroyed my ability to think clearly. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. And Emma was about to discover that her mother was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The next morning brought Ray Sullivan to my door at exactly 8 o'clock, accompanied by a slight woman with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Sophia, meet Linda Chen. She's the cybersecurity specialist I mentioned, former NSA, now freelance. If Emma's been in your computer, Linda will find the evidence." Linda's handshake was firm and professional. "Mrs. Rockwell, I've heard about your case from Ray. I want you to know that what's happening to you makes me sick. I lost my own mother to elder abuse, though not as extreme as this." "Then you understand why we need to be thorough," I replied, leading them to James's office. Linda worked with an efficiency that reminded me of my own investigative days. Within minutes, she had James's computer connected to sophisticated diagnostic equipment. "Your daughter is not as clever as she thinks," Linda said after 20 minutes of analysis. "She's been accessing this computer regularly for the past 4 months. Look at this." On the screen, a detailed log showed every file Emma had opened, every email she had read, every document she had copied. "She's been particularly interested in your financial records and legal documents," Linda continued. "But here's the interesting part. She's also been deleting emails. Your husband's correspondence with Dr. Patterson, with your lawyer, with several other people. She's been systematically erasing evidence." Ray leaned forward. "Can you recover what she deleted?" "Already working on it." Linda's fingers flew across her keyboard. "She's good with basic computer skills, but she doesn't understand forensic data recovery. Everything she thought she erased is still here." What emerged over the next hour was a complete picture of Emma's activities. She had been reading our private correspondence, monitoring our financial transactions, and deleting anything that might expose her activities. But most damaging of all, Linda found something that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Rockwell, your daughter has been researching the symptoms and progression of dementia and Alzheimer's disease extensively. She's been visiting medical websites, downloading articles about cognitive decline, and even participating in online forums for families dealing with elderly relatives who have lost mental capacity." The pieces clicked into place. Emma wasn't just planning to poison me into mental confusion. She was educating herself on how to make it appear like natural cognitive decline. "There's more," Linda continued. "She's been researching legal procedures for having someone declared mentally incompetent. She's downloaded forms for guardianship applications and been visiting websites for lawyers who specialize in elder law." Ray whistled low. "She's been planning this for months. This isn't impulsive. It's calculated and methodical. Just like her father's murder," I said quietly. "Linda, can you tell when she started this research?" "The earliest activity I can trace goes back 8 months. That's when she first started visiting medical websites about cognitive decline." 8 months. Emma had been planning to destroy our family for 8 months, long before James had even gotten seriously ill. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Margaret Morrison. "Sophia, I have news. I put out some discreet inquiries about Emma's finances using contacts I have in the banking industry. You're not going to like what I found. Tell me." "Emma has 3 credit cards that are maxed out, totaling nearly $50,000 in debt. She also has a personal loan that's in default. And there's something else. She's been gambling. Online poker, specifically. The transaction history shows she's lost substantial amounts over the past year." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Emma wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. The debt, the gambling addiction, the pressure of maintaining her lifestyle while slowly sinking financially. Her parents' deaths weren't just about inheritance. They were about survival. "Margaret, I need you to accelerate our timeline. Can you have those modified estate documents ready by tomorrow?" "Already working on them. But Sophia, given what you've just told me, I think we need to involve the police sooner rather than later. This woman is dangerous." After I hung up, I looked at Ray and Linda, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. "We need to move faster," I said. "Emma's financial desperation makes her unpredictable. Desperate people make desperate choices." Ray nodded. "I'll contact Detective Morrison at the police department. Sarah Morrison. She's Margaret's niece, actually. She specializes in financial crimes and elder abuse. I think it's time to bring law enforcement into this officially." "Not yet," I insisted. "We need one more piece of evidence, something undeniable." Linda looked up from her computer. "Mrs. Rockwell, I might be able to help with that. I can install monitoring software on your daughter's devices that will track her activities in real time. If she's planning something immediate, we'll know about it." "How?" "She's been using your home Wi-Fi to access all these websites and do her research. I can create a backdoor that will give us access to everything she does online, every text message she sends, every phone call she makes from her smartphone." Ray frowned. "Linda, that's legally questionable without a warrant." "Not if Mrs. Rockwell gives permission for monitoring on her own network," Linda replied smoothly. "And given that we suspect ongoing attempted murder, I think any judge would understand." I thought about the ethics of spying on my own daughter, then remembered James's emails, the antifreeze in my kitchen, the calculated way Emma had been systematically destroying our family. Do it. Linda worked for another 2 hours, installing her monitoring systems and showing me how to access the information they would gather. "Everything Emma does electronically will be recorded and stored," she explained. "Phone calls, text messages, internet browsing, email. We'll have a complete record." Just as Linda was finishing, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Emma's car in the driveway. "She's here," I said quietly. "Ray, Linda, you need to leave through the back door, now." They gathered their equipment quickly and slipped out through the kitchen while I went to answer the front door. "Hi, Mom." Emma's voice was bright and cheerful. "I brought lunch again. That soup you liked so much. How thoughtful of you, dear." I stepped aside to let her in, noticing how her eyes immediately scanned the living room, looking for any signs that I'd had visitors. "Were you expecting someone?" I thought I saw cars in the neighborhood. Just some maintenance people working on the Hendersons' house next door, I lied smoothly. You know how these old neighborhoods are, always something being repaired. Emma relaxed slightly. Well, I'm glad you're having a quiet day. You need your rest. As she heated up the soup in my kitchen, where she had been slowly poisoning me for weeks, I watched her with new eyes. Every gesture, every smile, every word of apparent concern was now revealed for what it truly was, the performance of a predator. Emma, sweetheart, I've been thinking about what we discussed yesterday, about the power of attorney and estate planning. Her hands stilled for just a moment as she stirred the soup. Oh? What about it? I think you're right. At my age, it's foolish to delay these things. I'm meeting with Margaret Morrison again tomorrow to sign the final documents. Emma turned around, her face carefully composed, but her eyes bright with interest. That's wonderful, Mom. It will give you such peace of mind. And you too, I imagine, knowing that you'll be able to take care of everything if something happens to me. Of course, Mom. You know I only want what's best for you. As she served me that poisoned soup, smiling with apparent love and devotion, I realized something that chilled me more than any of her previous actions. Emma actually believed her own performance. She had convinced herself that slowly murdering her parents was somehow an act of love, of mercy. In her twisted logic, she was helping us avoid the inconvenience of a long decline. The scariest criminals I had learned during my FBI years were not the ones who knew they were evil. They were the ones who had convinced themselves they were heroes. After Emma left, I poured the soup down the drain and checked Linda's monitoring system. Already, there were results. Emma had made 3 phone calls on her drive home. The first was to a lawyer's office, asking about expediting guardianship proceedings. The second was to a real estate agent, inquiring about the current market value of my house. The third was to someone named Marcus, and that conversation made my hands shake as I read the transcript. It's working perfectly, Marcus. She's getting weaker every day, and tomorrow she's signing over power of attorney. Once I have legal control, I can move her to that facility we discussed and put the house on the market. We'll have the money to cover your debt within 60 days. Marcus. The gambling debt Margaret had discovered wasn't just Emma's. She had a partner, someone who was also pressuring her for money. This wasn't just about a daughter killing her parents for inheritance anymore. This was about a conspiracy, with Emma caught between her own greed and external threats. The stakes had just gotten much higher, and the timeline had just gotten much shorter. Tomorrow, when Emma thought she was getting power of attorney over a confused old woman, she was actually going to walk into a trap that would expose everything. But first, I had to survive the night. That evening, Linda's monitoring system revealed something that made me understand just how deep Emma's betrayal went. At 9:47 p.m., Emma made a video call to someone named Dr. Richard Steinberg. I watched in real time as she sat in her apartment, speaking to a man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Steinberg, thank you for taking my call so late. I'm very worried about my mother's condition. The man on screen nodded sympathetically. Of course, Emma. You mentioned she's been showing signs of cognitive decline? It's getting worse rapidly. Memory lapses, confusion, difficulty with basic tasks. Yesterday, she forgot how to use the microwave. This morning, she asked me 3 times what day it was. I stared at the screen in horror. Emma was lying with such conviction that even I might have believed her if I hadn't known the truth. These symptoms are consistent with early-stage dementia, Dr. Steinberg replied. Has she seen her primary physician? She refuses to go. She's becoming paranoid, saying that everyone is trying to hurt her. Dr. Steinberg, I think she might be becoming a danger to herself. That's a serious concern. In cases like this, family members sometimes need to pursue emergency guardianship to ensure the patient's safety. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. I have an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow to begin those proceedings. Would you be willing to provide a professional evaluation to support the guardianship application? Based on what you've described, I believe that would be appropriate. I can have my office prepare the necessary documentation. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence. Emma hadn't just been poisoning me physically. She had been constructing an entire false narrative about my mental state. She had found a doctor who would support her claims without ever examining me, based solely on her fabricated reports of my behavior. But the monitoring system wasn't finished revealing Emma's secrets. At 10:15 p.m., she received a text message that made everything clear. "Time's up, Emma. Marcus is getting impatient. If you don't have the money by Friday, he's going to take matters into his own hands. You know what that means." Emma's response was immediate. "I'm handling it. Mom signs the papers tomorrow. I'll have access to her accounts by the end of the week." The reply came back quickly. "She better. Marcus doesn't like waiting, and he especially doesn't like people who owe him money making excuses." Another text arrived a few minutes later, this one from a different number. "Emma, this is Marcus. I've been very patient with you, but my patience has limits. You owe me $87,000. If I don't see substantial progress by Friday, I'll have to discuss your situation with your mother directly. I'm sure she'd be very interested to learn about your gambling problem." Emma's response revealed the full scope of her desperation. "Please don't contact my mother. I swear I'll have the money. She's signing over power of attorney tomorrow. I can access her investment accounts by Thursday." "You better hope so. Because if this deal falls through, you and Mommy are both going to have problems." I read that last message 3 times, my blood growing colder with each reading. This Marcus wasn't just pressuring Emma for gambling debts, he was threatening both of us. Emma had gotten involved with dangerous people, and now those people knew about me and my assets. My daughter hadn't just been slowly poisoning me. She had painted a target on both our backs. I called Ray immediately. "Sophia? It's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "Ray, it's worse than we thought. Emma's not just acting alone, and she's not just after my inheritance. She's being threatened by someone named Marcus, who she owes $87,000 to. And he's threatening to involve me directly if she doesn't pay up." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Sophia, you need to get out of that house tonight. If this Marcus decides to take matters into his own hands, you could be in immediate physical danger." "I'm not running, Ray, but I need you to find out who this Marcus is and what kind of people we're dealing with." "I'm already on it. I have contacts in the organized crime unit. If this guy is who I think he is, we're not just dealing with loan sharks. We're dealing with people who use violence as a business tool." After I hung up with Ray, I double-checked all my locks and set the security system James had insisted on installing 2 years ago. Then I sat in his chair with a baseball bat across my knees and waited for morning. At 3 a.m., Linda's system captured something that made me glad I had stayed awake. Emma had driven to my house and was sitting in her car across the street, just watching. The infrared camera Ray had installed showed her silhouette in the driver's seat, motionless, for over an hour. What was she thinking about as she sat there? Was she having second thoughts about what she had done to her father and what she was doing to me? Or was she calculating whether she had time to accelerate her timeline? At 4:15 a.m., she finally drove away. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Margaret Morrison called with news that confirmed my worst fears. "Sophia, I have information about this Marcus person. His full name is Marcus Torino, and he's not just a loan shark. He's connected to organized crime families in the city. The police have been trying to build a case against him for years, but he's careful about covering his tracks." "What kind of business is he in?" "Officially, he owns several legitimate businesses, restaurants, a small construction company, a few retail stores. Unofficially, he runs high-stakes gambling operations and provides loans to people who can't get credit through normal channels. People who default on his loans have a tendency to experience unfortunate accidents." The picture was becoming clearer and more terrifying. Emma hadn't just gotten involved with gambling. She had gotten involved with criminals who would use violence against both of us if they didn't get their money. "Margaret, we need to accelerate everything. If Emma doesn't get access to my assets by Friday, both of us could be in physical danger." "I understand. The trap documents are ready, but Sophia, I strongly recommend we bring in law enforcement now. This has moved beyond civil matters into criminal territory. One more day. Let Emma take the bait with the power of attorney documents, and then we'll have everything we need for a prosecution." But even as I said it, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. Was my desire to see Emma face complete justice worth the risk of waiting another day? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Rockwell, this is Marcus Torino. I think we should meet and discuss your daughter's debt to me. I'm sure we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone involved." My blood froze. Marcus was contacting me directly, which meant Emma's timeline had collapsed. She had run out of time, and now he was coming after both of us. I forwarded the message to Ray immediately, then sat down to think through my options. I could run, pack a bag, and disappear until law enforcement could arrest Emma and hopefully Marcus. But running would mean abandoning the investigation and possibly letting Emma escape justice for James's murder. I could confront Emma directly, tell her I knew everything, and try to get her to confess. But that would put me in immediate danger and might cause her to panic and do something even more desperate. Or I could stick to the plan, meet with Margaret this afternoon, let Emma think she was getting power of attorney, and use that meeting to expose her crimes. But with Marcus now in the picture, that meant risking both our lives on the assumption that I could control the situation. As I weighed my options, Emma's key turned in the front door lock. "Mom, I brought breakfast." Her voice was bright and cheerful, but there was an underlying tension I had never heard before. She appeared in the doorway with another one of her carefully prepared meals, but her smile seemed forced and her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right, dear? You look stressed." "Just work stuff, Mom. Nothing for you to worry about." She set the tray down and studied my face carefully. "You look much more alert today. Are you feeling better?" "Much better. In fact, I'm looking forward to our meeting with Margaret this afternoon. Getting these legal matters settled will be such a relief." Something flickered in Emma's eyes. Not just anticipation, but desperation. "Mom, I need to ask you something. After we sign the power of attorney documents, would you be willing to consider liquidating some of your investment accounts? I've been reading about market instability, and I think it might be wise to move your money into safer vehicles." There it was. Emma wasn't just planning to wait for me to die naturally after gaining legal control. She was planning to empty my accounts immediately. "That sounds very prudent, dear. You're so much smarter about these things than I am." "I'm glad you trust me, Mom. I promise I'll take good care of everything." As Emma prepared to leave for work, she turned back at the door. "Mom, after our meeting today, I think maybe we should celebrate. Maybe you could make that pot roast you used to make when I was little." The request seemed innocent, but I understood what she was really asking. She wanted me to cook, to handle food preparation myself, so she could add her poison to something I had made with my own hands. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. Just like old times." After she left, I called Margaret and Ray. "It's happening today," I told them. "Emma's planning to liquidate my accounts immediately after getting power of attorney. And this Marcus person is pressuring her to move faster. We need to be ready for anything." "Sophia," Ray said, "I have unmarked units positioned around your neighborhood and Margaret's office. If anything goes wrong, help will be there in seconds. And I have district attorney's office standing by," Margaret added. "The moment Emma signs those documents and reveals her intentions, we can have her arrested." But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all underestimating just how desperate and dangerous Emma had become. Today would either bring justice for James's murder and my attempted murder, or it would bring something much worse. The game was about to end one way or another. At noon, I received a call that changed everything. "Mrs. Rockwell, this is Detective Sarah Morrison. I'm Margaret's niece, and I specialize in elder abuse and financial crimes. I think it's time we met." An hour later, Detective Morrison sat in my living room, reviewing the evidence I had accumulated over the past 4 days. She was younger than I had expected, perhaps 40, with intelligent brown eyes, and the same sharp attention to detail I remembered from my FBI days. "Mrs. Rockwell, what you've uncovered here is extraordinary. Most victims of this type of systematic abuse never realize what's happening to them until it's too late. I had advantages most victims don't have: professional training and the resources to fight back." Detective Morrison nodded. "Your forensic background definitely saved your life, but now we need to discuss how to proceed safely. This Marcus Torino complicates everything." She opened a thick file folder. "Torino has been on our radar for 3 years. He operates what we call a graduated pressure loan operation. He starts with legitimate-seeming loans to people with gambling problems, then gradually increases the pressure until his victims are forced to commit crimes to pay him back." "Crimes like murdering their parents for inheritance money?" "Exactly. We've suspected him of being behind at least 6 suspicious deaths in the past 2 years, but we've never been able to prove the connection. Your case could be the key to bringing down his entire organization." Detective Morrison spread photographs across my coffee table. "These are some of Torino's other victims. Notice the pattern. They're all middle-aged people with gambling debts who suddenly came into unexpected inheritances after family members died under questionable circumstances. Looking at those photographs was like staring into a gallery of Emma's potential future victims. Men and women who had started with gambling problems and ended up as accessories to murder. Detective, how much danger am I in right now? Significant danger. Torino doesn't like loose ends, and he especially doesn't like investigations that might expose his operation. If he realizes we're building a case against him through Emma, he might decide to eliminate both of you. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mom, I'm so excited about our meeting this afternoon. After we finish with Margaret, maybe we could go shopping. I saw this beautiful necklace that would look perfect on you. I showed the message to Detective Morrison, who frowned. She's planning something for after the meeting. Mrs. Rockwell, I don't think you should go through with this. The risk is too high. Detective, if we don't proceed today, Emma will realize something is wrong. She'll either run or escalate to direct violence. Either way, we lose our chance to get justice for James and to stop her from killing again. Detective Morrison studied me for a long moment. You're determined to see this through. I've spent my entire career putting criminals behind bars. I'm not going to stop now just because this criminal happens to be my daughter. We spent the next hour refining our plan. Detective Morrison would be present during the meeting with Margaret, posed as a paralegal. Additional officers would be stationed around the building and ready to intervene if Emma became violent. Most importantly, they would be recording everything Emma said and did. The moment she reveals her true intentions about accessing your accounts, we'll have grounds for arrest, Detective Morrison explained. But Mrs. Rockwell, you have to promise me something. If the situation starts to feel dangerous, if your instincts tell you something is wrong, you give us the signal and we move immediately. At 2:30 p.m., I arrived at Margaret's office. Emma was already there, sitting in the waiting room with an expression of barely contained excitement. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, a conservative business suit that made her look responsible and trustworthy. Mom, you look wonderful today, so much stronger. I feel strong, dear, ready to take care of these important matters. In Margaret's office, Detective Morrison was introduced as Sarah, our new paralegal who specializes in estate planning. Emma barely glanced at her. Her attention was focused entirely on the documents Margaret spread across the conference table. These are the power of attorney documents we discussed, Margaret explained. Emma, as Sophia's designated agent, you would have broad authority over her financial and medical decisions in the event she becomes incapacitated. Emma's eyes gleamed as she reviewed the paperwork. What she didn't know was that the documents contained hidden clauses that would actually prevent her from accessing my accounts and would create an electronic trail of any attempted fraud. This all looks perfect, Emma said. Mom, are you sure you understand what you're signing? Of course, dear. I'm giving you the authority to take care of me if I can't take care of myself anymore. That's right. And Mom, we should probably discuss your investment portfolio. I've been researching some safer options that might be better for someone your age. Oh? What did you have in mind? Emma glanced at Margaret and Detective Morrison, then leaned closer to me. Well, those tech stocks Dad invested in are very volatile. I think we should move that money into something more stable, maybe even liquid savings where it would be immediately accessible if you needed long-term care. Detective Morrison caught my eye and nodded slightly. Emma was revealing her intentions exactly as we had hoped. That sounds very sensible, I said. How quickly could we make those changes? I could start the process as early as tomorrow. In fact, I've already researched some options. We could liquidate the majority of your portfolio and have the funds transferred to accounts where I could access them immediately if you needed emergency care. Margaret made careful notes, documenting every word Emma said. Emma, you're talking about liquidating approximately how much in assets? Well, Mom has about $800,000 in various investments, plus the value of this house, which is probably worth another $300,000. I think we should be prepared to access all of it if necessary. All of it, Detective Morrison repeated, as if clarifying for her notes. And you would want immediate access to these funds. Absolutely. You never know when elderly people might need expensive care very quickly. I watched my daughter as she spoke and realized that she had completely convinced herself that her planned theft was actually a form of caring for me. In her mind, Stealing my life savings was an act of love. After I signed the documents, the fake documents that would actually protect my assets while creating evidence of Emma's fraud attempts, Emma practically glowed with satisfaction. "Mom, I'm so proud of you for taking care of these important matters. Dad would be so pleased to know you're being responsible about your future." Hearing her mention James, the husband she had murdered, while discussing her plans to steal everything he had worked for, was almost more than I could bear. "Emma," I said quietly, "do you ever think about your father? About how much he loved you?" For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Regret? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Of course I think about Dad. That's why I want to make sure you're taken care of the way he would have wanted." As we left Margaret's office, Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom, this calls for a celebration. Let's go to that little restaurant Dad loved, the one with the wine selection he always bragged about." Something in her tone made me alert. Emma had never been particularly interested in wine, and the restaurant she was suggesting was isolated, far from any of the areas where Detective Morrison had positioned backup officers. "That sounds lovely, dear, but I'm feeling a bit tired. Maybe we could just go home and I could make that pot roast you mentioned?" Emma's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, but Mom, I had my heart set on celebrating properly. And you've been cooped up in the house so much lately. The fresh air would do you good." I realized that Emma was trying to get me somewhere isolated, away from my home where Detective Morrison's team was monitoring everything. The pot roast suggestion had been bait. She wanted me cooking so she could add poison to something I had prepared myself. But now she was changing plans, which meant something had made her accelerate her timeline. My phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number I now knew belonged to Marcus Torino. "Emma tells me you signed papers today. Good. I expect payment by tomorrow evening. Don't disappoint me." Emma saw me reading the message and went pale. "Mom, who was that?" "I don't know. Some spam message about payments. You know how these scammers are." But Emma's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Marcus wasn't waiting until Friday anymore. He was demanding payment immediately, which meant Emma was under enormous pressure to access my accounts right away, which meant I was in immediate danger. "Actually, dear, that restaurant sounds perfect," I said, making my decision. "Let's celebrate properly." If Emma was planning something desperate, it was better to have it happen in public where Detective Morrison's team could intervene, rather than wait and wonder what she might try at home. But as we walked to Emma's car, I caught sight of a black sedan that had been parked across from Margaret's office. Through the windshield, I could see a man with dark hair and cold eyes watching us. Marcus Torino wasn't just pressuring Emma anymore. He was here, watching, making sure his investment paid off. The trap we had set for Emma was about to become something much more dangerous for all of us. The restaurant Emma chose was 20 minutes outside the city, a small Italian place tucked into a strip mall where the parking lot was half empty and the nearest police station was miles away. As we drove, I noticed the black sedan following us at a discreet distance. "Emma, tell me about this Marcus person who's been texting me." Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What Marcus person?" "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. The man who says you owe him money. The man who thinks I should pay your debts." Emma pulled into the restaurant parking lot and turned off the engine, but she didn't get out of the car. Instead, she sat staring straight ahead, her knuckles white as she gripped the wheel. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "I've made some mistakes, financial mistakes, and now someone is pressuring me to fix them quickly." It was the closest thing to honesty Emma had shown me in months, but it was still wrapped in lies and manipulation. "What kind of mistakes, sweetheart?" "Gambling. I started playing poker online just for fun, but it became more serious than I intended. I owe some money to people who aren't very patient about repayment." "How much money?" Emma was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. Finally, she whispered, $87,000. I let the number hang in the air between us, watching her face. She was waiting for me to react with shock, with offers to help, with the kind of unconditional parental support that would make her feel justified in what she was planning to do. "That's a significant amount," I said carefully. "Mom, these people, they're not like normal creditors. They're dangerous. If I don't pay them back soon, they're going to hurt both of us." There it was. Emma was positioning herself as a victim, trying to make me feel that helping her steal my assets was actually protecting both of us from external threats. What are you asking me to do, Emma? The power of attorney we signed today. It gives me access to your investment accounts. If I could liquidate some of your stocks, just temporarily, I could pay these people back and keep us both safe. You want me to give you $87,000. It's not giving, Mom. It's protecting. These people know where you live. They know everything about our family. If I don't pay them, they'll come after you too. Before I could respond, someone knocked on Emma's window. We both jumped, and Emma let out a small cry when she saw who was standing there. Marcus Torino was younger than I had expected, perhaps 45, with thick dark hair and expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the predatory coldness in his eyes. He gestured for Emma to roll down the window. Emma, Mrs. Rockwell. What a pleasant surprise to run into you here. Marcus, what are you doing here? Emma's voice was shaking. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on my investment. Emma's told me so much about you, Mrs. Rockwell. You raised such a thoughtful daughter, always thinking about her family's welfare. I studied Marcus's face as he spoke. This was a man who had turned manipulation into an art form, who could make threats sound like friendly conversation. Mr. Torino, I understand my daughter owes you money. She does indeed, quite a substantial amount, but I'm sure a woman of your resources can help her resolve this unfortunate situation. And if I choose not to help? Marcus's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Mrs. Rockwell, I'm sure that's not a choice you would make. After all, Emma is your only child. Family is so important, don't you think? It wasn't a question. It was a threat wrapped in politeness. Pay the debt, or Emma would face consequences, and possibly me as well. Perhaps we should discuss this inside, over dinner, Marcus continued. I find that business conversations go so much better when everyone is comfortable. Emma looked at me with pleading eyes. She was terrified, caught between the debt she had created and the mother she had been trying to murder. In her desperation, she had apparently told Marcus that I would willingly help pay her debts, not realizing that she was painting a target on both our backs. That sounds reasonable, I said, making a decision that I hoped Detective Morrison's team would understand. Inside the restaurant, Marcus chose a corner table where we could speak privately. He was charming and solicitous, helping me with my chair and commenting on how lovely it was that Emma was so devoted to her mother. Mrs. Rockwell, Emma has explained your family's recent losses. I understand you lost your husband recently. Yes, James died 2 months ago. My condolences. Emma was quite broken up about it when she first came to me for financial assistance. She spoke so lovingly about both her parents. I glanced at Emma, who was staring at her hands. Marcus knew nothing about the poisoning, about James's murder, about Emma's systematic plan to kill both her parents. In his mind, he was dealing with a grieving daughter who had made some bad financial choices and a wealthy mother who could afford to bail her out. Mr. Torino, Emma mentioned that you're not particularly patient about repayment. Time is money, Mrs. Rockwell. In my business, delays cost everyone involved. But I'm a reasonable man. I understand that accessing large amounts of money can take time, especially when dealing with investment accounts and estate planning. How much time are we talking about? Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold, calculating eyes. Emma signed papers today that give her access to your financial accounts. I would think 48 hours should be sufficient to liquidate the necessary investments. 48 hours. Marcus expected Emma to steal nearly $100,000 from me within 2 days. And if that timeline isn't possible, Mrs. Rockwell, I'm sure it will be possible. Emma is very motivated to resolve this situation quickly. Aren't you, Emma? Emma nodded miserably. She was trapped between the debt she owed Marcus and the crime she had been planning to commit against me. What she didn't realize was that both of us were now trapped in a situation that could only end in violence. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw a message from Detective Morrison. We have eyes on you. Stay calm. Help is close. Excuse me, I said to Marcus. I need to use the restroom. In the bathroom, I called Detective Morrison's number. Sophia, are you all right? We saw Torino approach your car. He's here. He expects Emma to steal nearly $100,000 from me within 48 hours. Detective, he doesn't know about the poisoning or the murder. He thinks Emma is just a grieving daughter with gambling debts. That actually works in our favor. We can use his ignorance to control the situation. Can you get back to the table without arousing suspicion? Yes, but Detective, I don't think we have much time. Marcus isn't the kind of man who accepts delays. We're going to move tonight. Can you keep them talking for another 20 minutes? When I returned to the table, Marcus and Emma were having a quiet but intense conversation. Emma looked even more terrified than before. Is everything all right? I asked. Everything's fine, Mom, Emma said quickly. Marcus was just explaining how the repayment process works. Marcus smiled that cold smile again. I was telling Emma that I appreciate families who work together to solve problems. It speaks well of both of you that you're willing to help each other. Family loyalty is very important, I agreed. Though I do have one question, Mr. Torino. Of course. What happens if Emma can't repay the full amount within your timeline? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Emma went pale, and Marcus's smile became more genuine and more frightening. Mrs. Rockwell, I've found that people can usually accomplish remarkable things when they're properly motivated. Emma understands the importance of meeting her obligations, and if she doesn't, then I would have to explore alternative arrangements for collecting what I'm owed, perhaps discussing the matter with Emma's other family members, or her employer, or other people who care about her welfare. The threat was clear. If Emma didn't pay, Marcus would destroy her life systematically, her job, her relationships, possibly her physical safety, and he would do the same to anyone who tried to help her. What Marcus didn't understand was that Emma had already destroyed her own life when she decided to murder her parents. The woman sitting across from me wasn't my daughter anymore. She was a killer who had gotten in over her head with dangerous people. But I was about to show both of them that they had picked the wrong victim. Mr. Torino, I think there's something you should know about my daughter's recent activities. Emma's head snapped up, panic in her eyes. Mom, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth, sweetheart. Something you haven't done in a very long time. Marcus leaned forward, interested. What truth is that, Mrs. Rockwell? The truth about how my husband really died. And the truth about what Emma's been putting in my food for the past 6 weeks. The color drained from Emma's face. Marcus looked confused, but alert. Something was happening that he hadn't anticipated. Mom, please don't what, Emma? Don't tell Mr. Torino that you've been slowly poisoning me with antifreeze while planning to have me declared mentally incompetent? Don't mention that you murdered your father the same way? Marcus's expression changed completely. The polite businessman facade disappeared, replaced by the face of a predator who had suddenly realized his prey was more dangerous than he had imagined. Emma, is this true? Emma couldn't speak. She was staring at me with a mixture of terror and betrayal, finally understanding that her mother wasn't the confused, grief-stricken victim she had thought she was manipulating. It's all true, Mr. Torino. My daughter is a murderer. And you've been pressuring her to steal money from her next victim. Marcus stood up slowly, his hand moving toward his jacket. Mrs. Rockwell, I think we need to continue this conversation somewhere more private. That was when Detective Morrison and 3 other officers walked through the restaurant's front door. The trap had finally closed, but not the way any of us had expected. Detective Morrison approached our table with her badge clearly visible, followed by 3 plainclothes officers who positioned themselves strategically around the restaurant. Marcus Torino, you're under arrest for extortion and conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus's reaction was immediate and violent. He lunged toward me, his hand reaching inside his jacket, but the officers were faster. Within seconds, he was face down on the floor with his arms cuffed behind his back. You stupid bitch, he snarled at Emma as they hauled him to his feet. You told me she was just a confused old woman. Emma was hyperventilating, staring at the scene with wide, terrified eyes. I didn't know. I never told him about... Mom, how did you... Emma Rockwell, you're also under arrest for the attempted murder of Sophia Rockwell and conspiracy to commit elder abuse and financial fraud. Detective Morrison's words seemed to hit Emma like physical blows. She looked around the restaurant wildly, as if searching for an escape route. This is a mistake, she whispered. Mom, tell them this is a mistake. I was trying to help you. I was protecting you from Marcus. Emma, stop talking, Detective Morrison said firmly as she handcuffed my daughter. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. But Emma couldn't stop talking. The months of careful planning, of maintaining her facade as a loving daughter, had finally cracked under pressure. "Mom, you don't understand. Marcus was going to hurt both of us if I didn't pay him back. I was trying to save us. By poisoning me with antifreeze? By killing your father?" Emma's face went completely white. "I never. Dad died naturally. He was sick. Emma, we have your computer records. We know you researched the symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. We know you deleted emails between your father and Dr. Patterson. We have evidence of everything." The restaurant had been cleared of other customers, leaving just our group and the officers. In the sudden quiet, Emma's breathing sounded harsh and panicked. "I want a lawyer," she finally said. "Smart choice," Detective Morrison replied. "You're going to need a good one." As they prepared to take both Emma and Marcus away, Detective Morrison pulled me aside. "Sophia, are you all right? I know this can't be easy, watching your own daughter get arrested." "Detective, the woman they're arresting isn't my daughter. My daughter died the moment she decided to murder her father and try to kill me. What's left is just a stranger who shares my DNA." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it entirely. Watching Emma being led away in handcuffs, seeing the terror and confusion in her eyes, part of me still saw the little girl I had raised with so much love. "There's something else," Detective Morrison continued. "We've been monitoring Torino's communications, and this goes much deeper than just your case. He's been operating a network that targets elderly people through their family members. Emma wasn't his first victim. She was part of a pattern." "How many others?" "At least 6 that we know of. Torino identifies people with gambling debts who have elderly relatives with assets. He pressures them into increasingly desperate acts to access their family members' money. Most of the time, it stays financial fraud. But in at least 3 cases that we can prove, the family members died under suspicious circumstances. The scope of what I had uncovered was staggering. Emma hadn't just been a daughter trying to steal from her mother. She had been part of a criminal network that systematically targeted elderly victims. "Will Emma cooperate with your investigation?" "That depends on her lawyer and how much she understands about the situation she's in. If she's smart, she'll realize that cooperating with us is her only chance of avoiding a life sentence." The next few hours passed in a blur of police stations, statements, and paperwork. I found myself in the surreal position of providing evidence that would send my own daughter to prison for attempted murder. But it was the phone call from Dr. Martinez that brought everything into sharp focus. "Sophia, I've been reviewing James's medical records in light of what the police have told me. I think you should know. I found traces of the same compound in his final blood tests that we found in yours." "You're certain?" "I'm certain. Your husband was being systematically poisoned for at least 6 weeks before his death. Emma didn't just try to kill you, she succeeded in killing James. That night, alone in the house where my family had lived for 20 years, I sat in James's chair and tried to process everything that had happened. My daughter was a murderer. She had killed her father and tried to kill me, all while maintaining the appearance of a loving, devoted family member. She had gotten involved with criminals who made their living exploiting family bonds and turning them into weapons. And she had almost succeeded. If Dr. Martinez hadn't been thorough with my blood tests, if I hadn't maintained my forensic skills, if I hadn't had the resources to fight back, I would be dead within weeks, and Emma would have inherited everything while being viewed as a grieving daughter who had lost both parents tragically. The phone rang, interrupting my dark thoughts. "Mrs. Rockwell? This is David Chen, Emma's court-appointed attorney. I need to discuss my client's situation with you." "There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Chen. Emma tried to murder me. She succeeded in murdering my husband. I hope she spends the rest of her life in prison." "Mrs. Rockwell, I understand your anger, but there are circumstances you might not be aware of. Emma was being coerced by Marcus Torino. She was threatened with violence if she didn't comply with his demands." "Mr. Chen, Emma started poisoning her father months before she ever met Marcus Torino. The gambling debts were just her excuse to accelerate a plan she had already put in motion." There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Chen spoke again. "Mrs. Rockwell, would you be willing to consider a plea arrangement if Emma provided testimony that helps convict Torino and his network?" "What kind of plea arrangement?" 25 years with the possibility of parole in 15. I thought about James, dying slowly and painfully, while his daughter smiled and brought him poisoned meals. I thought about the months of confusion and sickness I had endured, not understanding that my own child was trying to kill me. Mr. Chen, your client murdered her father and attempted to murder her mother for money. There is no plea arrangement that would be appropriate for those crimes. Mrs. Rockwell, 25, to life without the possibility of parole and full cooperation in prosecuting Torino's network. That's the only deal I would consider. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and realized that the most difficult part of this ordeal was still ahead of me. The legal proceedings would drag on for months. I would have to testify against my own daughter, reliving every detail of her betrayal and James's murder. The media would turn our family tragedy into entertainment, dissecting our relationships and speculating about what had gone wrong. But worst of all, I would have to live with the knowledge that I had raised a child capable of murder. Somewhere along the way, the little girl who had once brought me flowers from the garden had become someone who could poison her own parents without remorse. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. Tonight, I just had to survive the silence of a house where my husband had been murdered and my daughter had tried to kill me with kindness. 3 weeks after Emma's arrest, her lawyer called with news that chilled me to the bone. Mrs. Rockwell, Emma has decided she wants to see you. She's requesting a meeting at the county jail. Absolutely not. She claims she has information about other victims in Torino's network. Information that could help save lives. I stared out the window at the garden where James and I had spent countless peaceful hours, now knowing that Emma had watched us from this same window while planning our deaths. Mr. Chen, if Emma has information that could help other victims, she should share it with the police. She doesn't need to see me to do that. She's refusing to cooperate unless you agree to meet with her. Mrs. Rockwell, there may be other elderly people in immediate danger right now. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even from jail, facing life in prison, Emma was still trying to use emotional leverage to get what she wanted. Now she was using other potential victims as bargaining chips. But what if she was telling the truth? What if there were other families being destroyed by Torino's network while I refused to face my daughter? 1 meeting, 30 minutes, and Detective Morrison has to be present. Agreed. The county jail was a stark, institutional building that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Detective Morrison met me in the parking lot, her expression concerned. Sophia, you don't have to do this. We can find other ways to get information about Torino's network. If Emma knows something that could save other people from what James and I went through, I need to hear it. The meeting room was small and sterile, with a metal table bolted to the floor and chairs that had been designed more for security than comfort. When they brought Emma in, I barely recognized her. The polished, professional woman who had been slowly poisoning me was gone. In her place was someone who looked years older, with hollow eyes and the pallor of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. Mom. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Emma. She sat down across from me, her handcuffed hands folded on the table. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across a space that felt like an unbridgeable chasm. You look well, she said finally. Stronger than you did before everything happened. Poison will do that to a person. Remove the poison, and they tend to recover. Emma flinched as if I had slapped her. Mom, I never meant for it to go so far. I was desperate, and Marcus was threatening me, and You just what, Emma? Accidentally put antifreeze in my food for 6 weeks? Accidentally deleted emails between your father and his doctor? Accidentally researched the symptoms of dementia to cover your tracks? I was trying to protect us. Her voice cracked with emotion, but I had learned not to trust Emma's emotions. She had perfected the art of seeming vulnerable and desperate when it served her purposes. Protect us from what? From poverty. From losing everything Dad worked for. Mom, you have no idea how expensive elder care is. If you had gotten sick, really sick, the medical bills would have destroyed everything Dad built. I stared at my daughter in amazement. She had convinced herself that murdering her parents was an act of financial responsibility. Emma, your father and I had long-term care insurance. We had savings. We had planned for the possibility of illness. It wouldn't have been enough. I researched it, Mom. The average cost of memory care is over $6,000 a month. Dad's insurance would have covered maybe 2 years. And then what? Then we would have dealt with it like millions of other families do. We would have made choices and sacrifices and found a way to manage. Easy to say now, but what about when you were confused and scared and didn't understand what was happening to you? What about when Dad was suffering and you were both too proud to ask for help? Emma's version of events was so twisted, so self-serving, that I almost couldn't comprehend it. In her mind, slowly poisoning us was a mercy killing, a way of sparing us the indignity of aging and illness. Emma, your father wasn't suffering when you started poisoning him. He had a manageable condition that could have given him years of quality life. The doctor said his prognosis wasn't good. The doctor said he needed to manage his diabetes more carefully and consider some lifestyle changes. That's hardly a death sentence. Emma's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee. Mom, I was so scared. The gambling debts were crushing me, and Marcus was threatening to hurt you if I didn't pay him back. I thought if I could just access Dad's insurance money and some of your investments, I could solve everything and you'd never have to know. So you decided to murder us. I decided to help you avoid suffering. The words exploded out of her with such vehemence that Detective Morrison leaned forward in her chair. Emma's mask was finally slipping completely. Help us avoid suffering by slowly killing us with poison? By making us confused and sick and afraid? I researched the doses carefully. It was supposed to be peaceful, like going to sleep. You wouldn't have known what was happening. But I did know, Emma. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I trusted you. I trusted my daughter when she brought me meals and told me she loved me and wanted to take care of me. Emma was crying now, but her tears felt like another manipulation. Mom, please. I know what I did was wrong, but I was desperate. Marcus showed me pictures of what happens to people who don't pay their debts. I was terrified for both of us. Emma, you started poisoning your father before you ever met Marcus. Your gambling debts were just a convenient excuse to accelerate a plan you had already put in motion. She went very still. How do you know that? Because I'm not the confused old woman you thought you were killing. I'm a forensic accountant who spent 30 years investigating financial crimes. I know how to follow money trails and timeline evidence. For the first time since she had been arrested, Emma looked at me with something approaching fear. You've been investigating me. I've been investigating the person who was trying to murder me. It just happened to be my daughter. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Emma, your mother didn't come here to debate your motivations. You said you have information about other victims in Torino's network. Emma's attention shifted to the detective, and I saw a calculating look cross her face. I do have information, but I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? I want my mother to agree to support a plea bargain. I'll tell you everything I know about Marcus's operation, but only if she publicly forgives me and asks for leniency at my sentencing. The audacity took my breath away. Emma was trying to use other people's lives as leverage to manipulate me into helping her avoid the full consequences of her crimes. Emma, tell Detective Morrison what you know about Torino's other victims. Not until you agree to my terms. I looked at my daughter across that metal table and realized that she would never change. Prison, consequences, the destruction of her life and our family. None of it had touched the core selfishness that had led her to murder her father and try to murder me. Detective Morrison, I think we're done here. Mom, wait. Emma's voice was desperate now. There are 3 other families. Marcus has people working on them right now. If you don't help me, those people are going to die. I stopped at the door and turned back to face her. Emma, give Detective Morrison the information she needs to save those families. Do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you want something in return. I want my mother back. The words came out as a wail of pain that echoed off the concrete walls. For just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the child I had raised, the daughter I had loved unconditionally. Your mother died the day you put poison in your father's medication. The woman sitting here is just someone who shares your DNA and wants to see justice done. As I walked out of that jail, leaving Emma crying behind the metal table, I realized that this confrontation had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It had finally freed me from any lingering guilt about what was happening to her. Emma was exactly where she belonged. The information Emma finally provided to Detective Morrison led to a discovery that shook me to my core. Torino's network wasn't just targeting random elderly victims. They had a system, a methodology that was both sophisticated and horrifying. "Sophia, you need to see this," Detective Morrison said, calling me to the police station the day after my meeting with Emma. "What we've uncovered goes far beyond anything we imagined." In the conference room, she had spread out files, photographs, and timeline charts that looked like something from a major organized crime investigation. "Torino has been operating for at least 5 years. He targets middle-aged people with gambling problems who have elderly relatives with substantial assets. But here's the truly disturbing part. He doesn't just pressure them into financial fraud. He actually coaches them on how to commit murder." She opened a thick folder and pulled out printed emails and text messages. "These are communications we recovered from Torino's phone. Look at this message he sent to Emma 3 months ago." The text made my stomach turn. "Remember, gradual decline looks natural. Doctors expect old people to get sicker over time. Small doses over longer periods. No one investigates natural aging. He was teaching her how to kill us," I said quietly. "It gets worse. Look at this." Detective Morrison showed me another message thread. Torino has been sharing techniques between his various victims. Emma was communicating with at least 4 other people who were poisoning their elderly relatives. The room seemed to spin around me. Emma hadn't just been a daughter who had made terrible choices under pressure. She had been part of a network of killers, sharing advice and techniques for murdering their own family members. "How many people are we talking about, Detective?" "Based on what we've found so far, at least 12 elderly victims over the past 3 years. Some died, others were rescued when their relatives confessed or got caught." "But Sophia, Emma was one of Torino's star pupils." Detective Morrison pulled out another file. "These are messages where Emma was giving advice to newer members of the group, teaching them about antifreeze dosages, about how to manipulate doctors, about legal procedures for gaining control of assets." I read the messages in horrified silence. My daughter hadn't just been killing her parents, she had been mentoring other people in how to kill their parents. "There's something else," Detective Morrison continued. "We arrested 2 of Emma's students yesterday. Based on her advice, they were in the process of poisoning a 90-year-old grandmother in Phoenix and an 83-year-old grandfather in Seattle. Are they? They're alive. We got to them in time. But Sophia, if you hadn't uncovered Emma's activities when you did, if you hadn't been smart enough and strong enough to fight back, we never would have found this network. Dozens of elderly people would have died. The weight of what I had stumbled into was staggering. By investigating my own attempted murder, I had accidentally exposed a systematic operation that was destroying families across the country. What happens now? Now we build cases against everyone involved. Torino is facing federal charges for running a criminal enterprise. Emma and the others are facing murder charges in multiple states. This is going to be one of the largest elder abuse prosecutions in history. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's lawyer. "Mrs. Rockwell, I need to discuss my client's situation with you urgently." "Mr. Chen, I thought I was clear about my position regarding plea bargains. The situation has changed dramatically. The federal prosecutors are now involved, and they're offering Emma a deal that could save her from the death penalty." My blood went cold. "The death penalty?" "Mrs. Rockwell, your daughter is being charged as the ringleader of a conspiracy that resulted in the deaths of at least 8 elderly people. Under federal law, that makes her eligible for capital punishment. I had been so focused on getting justice for James and myself that I hadn't fully considered the scope of Emma's involvement in the broader conspiracy." "What kind of deal are they offering?" "Life without parole in exchange for full cooperation in prosecuting Torino and the other network members. But Mrs. Rockwell, she's refusing to take the deal unless you agree to visit her again." Even facing the possibility of execution, Emma was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to use emotional leverage to get what she wanted. "Mr. Chen, tell your client that her life or death is no longer my responsibility. She made her choices when she decided to become a serial killer." "Mrs. Rockwell, good day, Mr. Chen." After I hung up, Detective Morrison studied my face with concern. That was a difficult conversation. "Detective, I need you to understand something. The woman in that jail cell is not my daughter anymore. My daughter was someone who brought me flowers from the garden when she was 7 years old, someone who held my hand during thunderstorms, someone who called me every week just to chat." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. The woman in jail is a stranger who killed my husband and tried to kill me while teaching other people how to kill their families. Whatever happens to her legally is a matter for the courts, not for me. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I entirely believed them. That evening, alone in the house where Emma had poisoned James and tried to poison me, I found myself looking at family photographs and trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. There was Emma at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning as she showed off a drawing she had made for Mother's Day. Emma at 10, serious and focused as she practiced piano. Emma at graduation, proud and beautiful and full of promise. When had that promising young woman become someone capable of systematic murder? Was there something James and I had missed, some warning sign we should have seen? My phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Martinez. "Sophia, I wanted you to know that I've been contacted by medical examiners from 3 other states. They're reviewing deaths that might be connected to Emma's network." "How many deaths?" "Potentially 15 or more. Sophia, your daughter may have been involved in advising on murders across the entire country. 15 murders. My daughter had become a consultant for family annihilation, teaching desperate people how to kill their elderly relatives for money. Dr. Martinez, I need to ask you something. When you look at James's medical records, when you think about how he died, was there anything I could have done differently? Any way I could have saved him?" The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. "Sophia, by the time you would have noticed symptoms, James was already too far gone. The poisoning had been systematic and carefully calculated. Even if you had brought him to the emergency room the day he died, we probably couldn't have saved him." So Emma knew exactly what she was doing. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't desperate improvisation. It was methodical murder. That night, I made a decision that would define the rest of this story. I would not visit Emma again. I would not provide her with the emotional closure she was seeking. I would not give her the opportunity to manipulate me one more time. Instead, I would do everything in my power to ensure that she and everyone in Torino's network faced the full consequences of their crimes. If Emma wanted to spend her final years on death row rather than accept a life sentence, that was her choice to make. Just as murdering her father and trying to murder me had been her choice. The next morning, I called Detective Morrison with a message for the federal prosecutors. "Tell them I'll testify in every trial they need me for. I'll help them build the strongest possible cases against everyone involved in this network. But I will not provide any character references or pleas for leniency for Emma. Are you sure, Sophia? Once this process starts, there's no going back. The trials could take years." "Detective, I spent 30 years of my career putting criminals in prison. I'm not going to stop now just because one of them happened to share my DNA." The final confrontation was coming, and this time it would be in a courtroom where Emma's tears and manipulations would carry no weight. Justice would finally have its day. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my daughter face the consequences of her choices. Emma had refused the life sentence plea deal, apparently convinced that she could manipulate a jury the same way she had manipulated her family for years. Her new defense attorney, an expensive criminal lawyer named Patricia Valdez, had built her strategy around portraying Emma as a victim of Torino's coercion and manipulation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Valdez said in her opening statement, "my client is not a monster. She is a daughter who was terrorized into making desperate choices by a criminal organization that threatened her family." I watched Emma sitting at the defense table, dressed in a conservative blue suit that made her look younger and more vulnerable. She had lost weight during her months in jail, and her lawyer had clearly coached her on how to appear sympathetic. But when the federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, began presenting the evidence, Emma's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The defendant was not a victim, Chen told the jury. She was a ringleader. The evidence will show that Emma Rockwell actively participated in a conspiracy that resulted in the deaths of 14 elderly Americans. She didn't just kill her own parents, she taught others how to kill theirs. The prosecution's case was devastating. They played recorded phone calls where Emma coached other network members on poisoning techniques. They showed emails where she shared advice on manipulating doctors and lawyers. They presented financial records proving she had profited from her crimes long before Torino had entered the picture. But it was the testimony from other victims' families that truly exposed the scope of Emma's involvement. Margaret Santos took the stand to describe how her brother had used Emma's methods to poison their 80-year-old father in Denver. David Kim testified about how Emma had personally advised his sister on gaining control of their grandmother's assets in San Francisco. The defendant told my sister exactly how much antifreeze to use, Kim said, his voice shaking with emotion. She told her how to make it look like natural aging. She told her how to delete evidence and manipulate medical records. When my turn came to testify, I looked directly at Emma as I spoke. My daughter killed my husband with systematic poisoning over a period of 6 weeks. She then attempted to kill me using the same methods while pretending to be a loving, caring daughter. Emma's lawyer objected repeatedly, trying to prevent me from describing the emotional impact of the betrayal. But Judge Rebecca Martinez allowed my testimony to continue. The defendant didn't just attempt murder, I continued. She perverted every expression of love and care, turning family meals into opportunities for poisoning, turning concern for my health into opportunities to accelerate my death. I described finding the antifreeze hidden in my kitchen, discovering James's deleted emails, uncovering the evidence of Emma's broader involvement in the murder network. My daughter was not coerced into these crimes, I concluded. She was an architect of them. During cross-examination, Emma's lawyer tried to portray me as a vindictive mother seeking revenge against a daughter who had made desperate mistakes. Mrs. Rockwell, isn't it possible that Emma's involvement in this network was the result of psychological pressure and fear? Ms. Valdez, my daughter researched murder techniques, coached other killers, and profited from multiple deaths. That's not fear, that's entrepreneurship. But surely you can understand that a mother's love might lead someone to make terrible choices to protect her family. I looked at Emma, who was staring at me with pleading eyes, still hoping I would provide the emotional support that might save her from the death penalty. Ms. Valdez, a mother's love doesn't lead to murder. Emma's choices were not driven by love. They were driven by greed, desperation, and a complete lack of empathy for human life. The trial continued for 3 weeks. Emma's defense team presented expert witnesses who testified about the psychological impact of financial pressure and criminal coercion. They brought in character witnesses who described Emma as a devoted daughter who had simply gotten in over her head. But the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, financial documents, email chains, and testimony from multiple victims created a picture of Emma as a central figure in a systematic murder conspiracy. The most damaging testimony came from Marcus Torino himself, who had agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Emma Rockwell was one of my most valuable associates, Torino testified from the witness stand. She wasn't just following orders, she was providing expertise. She had successfully killed her father and was working on her mother. Other members of the network looked up to her. "Did you threaten Ms. Rockwell or her mother?" the prosecutor asked. I applied pressure about her gambling debts, but Emma was already planning to kill her parents when I met her. The debt situation just gave her a timeline and a justification. Emma's reaction to Torino's testimony was visible to everyone in the courtroom. Her mask finally slipped completely, and for a moment, the cold calculation I had seen in my kitchen was visible to the jury. During the penalty phase of the trial, Emma finally took the stand in her own defense. "I know what I did was wrong," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was desperate and scared, and I made terrible choices, but I never meant for anyone to get hurt." The federal prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. "Ms. Rockwell, you sent an email to Patricia Williams in Phoenix advising her to increase the dosage gradually so the symptoms would look like natural progression." "Well, what did you mean by that?" Emma's composure cracked. I was just trying to help her avoid getting caught." "Help her avoid getting caught murdering her grandmother?" "I was scared that if she got caught, Marcus would hurt my mother." "Ms. Rockwell, this email was sent 2 months before you ever met Marcus Torino." Emma had no answer. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned, Emma stood to face their verdict with her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in furtherance of a racketeering enterprise, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of using interstate commerce facilities in the commission of murder for hire, we find the defendant guilty. The verdicts continued for 20 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Judge Martinez scheduled the penalty phase for the following month, but I already knew what the outcome would be. The evidence had been too overwhelming, Emma's role too central, the scope of the conspiracy too vast. As they led Emma away in shackles, she turned to look at me one final time. There was no longer any pretense of being a victim or seeking forgiveness. In her eyes, I saw only cold calculation and the knowledge that her manipulations had finally failed. "Mom," she called out, as the bailiffs guided her toward the door. "I hope you can live with yourself." I watched my daughter disappear through the courthouse door and realized that for the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. The woman who had killed James and tried to kill me was finally facing justice. The network of killers she had helped build was being dismantled. Other families would be spared the horror that mine had endured. Emma was right about one thing. I would have to live with myself and with the knowledge that I had raised someone capable of such systematic evil. But I could also live with the knowledge that when it mattered most, I had been strong enough to fight back and smart enough to expose the truth. Justice had been served, even if it came at the cost of losing my daughter forever. 1 year after Emma's sentencing to death by lethal injection, I received a letter that would be our final communication. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, postmarked from the federal death row facility where Emma was awaiting execution of her sentence. Her appeals had been unsuccessful, and the courts had upheld both her conviction and death sentence. Inside, written in the careful handwriting I remembered from her childhood, was a letter that revealed more about who Emma had become than anything she had said during the trial. "Dear Mother, I know you will never forgive me for what I did to Dad and what I tried to do to you. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not writing to ask for it. I'm writing to tell you something I should have said during the trial, but I was too proud and too angry to admit. You were right about everything. I wasn't coerced by Marcus Torino. I wasn't desperate or confused or manipulated into making terrible choices. I planned to kill you and Dad because I wanted your money, and I was tired of waiting for you to die naturally. I researched the methods. I calculated the doses. I enjoyed the feeling of control I had over both your lives. And when I got involved with Marcus's network, I discovered something that terrified me about myself. I was good at murder. Really good. I understood the psychology of it, the technical aspects, the legal vulnerabilities that could be exploited. I became a teacher because I found purpose in helping other people kill their families. It made me feel important and powerful in a way that nothing else in my life ever had. You asked me once during the trial when I stopped being your daughter. The answer is that I never stopped being your daughter. I just became something else as well. Everything you taught me about being thorough, about attention to detail, about thinking through consequences, I used all of that to become a more effective killer. Every family value you and Dad instilled in me about loyalty and protection, I twisted those into justifications for murder. I know that the woman who raised me with such love and dedication is wondering where she went wrong, what signs she missed, how she could have prevented this. The answer is that you couldn't have prevented it. There were no signs to miss because I hid them well. You didn't go wrong anywhere because some people are just born with something broken inside them. I love you, Mom. I have always loved you, even while I was killing Dad and trying to kill you. That's the most terrible thing of all. That love and murder could exist in the same person, directed at the same people. I hope you can find peace in knowing that the network has been dismantled and that other families won't go through what ours did. I hope you can find happiness in whatever time you have left. And I hope you understand that when they execute me, they will be killing someone who was both your loving daughter and a monster who destroyed our family. Both of those things are true, and neither cancels out the other. Goodbye, Emma. I read that letter 3 times, then sat in James's chair and cried for the first time since his funeral. Not for Emma. She had made her choices and would face their consequences. But for the family we might have been. For the daughter I had loved who had never really existed. And for the husband who had died never knowing that his child had become his killer. That afternoon, I called Detective Morrison to tell her about the letter. "Sophia, how are you handling this?" "Better than I expected. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Emma's execution is scheduled for next month, and she's asked if I want to be present. Are you considering it? No. I said goodbye to my daughter the day I discovered she was trying to murder me. The woman being executed is a stranger who killed my husband. I think that's wise. Sophia, I want you to know that the Emma Rockwell case has become a training example for law enforcement agencies across the country. Your investigation and the way you handled the situation has helped us identify and prevent similar crimes. After the call, I walked through the house where James and I had shared 40 years of marriage, where Emma had grown up, where our family had been systematically destroyed by someone who claimed to love us. I had made a decision about what to do with the rest of my life. The next morning, I called Margaret Morrison to discuss establishing a foundation in James's memory, one that would provide resources and training to help elderly people and their families recognize the signs of financial abuse and systematic poisoning. I also called the FBI field office, where I had once worked, to offer my services as a consultant on elder abuse cases. Mrs. Rockwell, we would be honored to have your expertise, Agent Patricia Walsh told me. Your experience with the Torino network has given you insights that could save countless lives. 6 months later, I was back to doing what I had always done best, hunting criminals. But now, I was hunting a specific type of criminal. The ones who used family bonds as weapons, who turned love into a tool for murder, who preyed on the elderly and vulnerable. I testified before congressional committees about the need for stronger laws protecting elderly Americans. I consulted with police departments on investigating suspicious deaths in families with financial motives. I helped develop training programs to teach medical professionals how to recognize the signs of systematic poisoning. Most importantly, I began speaking at conferences and community centers, sharing my story and teaching people how to protect themselves and their elderly family members. The most dangerous criminals, I would tell my audiences, are not strangers who break into your home. They are the people who already have keys to your house and access to your bank accounts. They are the people you trust most. Emma's execution took place on a cold Tuesday morning in February. I did not attend, but I spent that day working on a case involving a son who was embezzling money from his 90-year-old mother in Oregon. When Detective Morrison called to tell me Emma was dead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not because my daughter was dead, but because the threat she represented to other families was finally over. That evening, I sat in James's chair and reflected on everything that had happened since that first phone call from Dr. Martinez warning me to leave my house immediately. I had lost my husband to murder and my daughter to the electric chair. My family had been destroyed by greed and betrayal. Everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me had been revealed as a lie. But I had also discovered something about myself that I hadn't known before. I was stronger and more resilient than I had ever imagined. I had turned my personal tragedy into a weapon against the kind of evil that had destroyed my family. I had used my pain to protect other families from experiencing the same horror. And I had learned that justice, while it comes at a terrible price, is worth pursuing no matter who the criminal turns out to be. My name is Sophia Rockwell. I am 63 years old, and I am a survivor. I survived my daughter's attempt to murder me. I survived the destruction of my family, and I have dedicated the rest of my life to making sure that other families don't have to survive what mine endured. The war against elder abuse and family-based financial crimes is far from over. But every criminal I help catch, every family I help protect, every elderly person who learns to recognize the warning signs, they are all victories in James's memory and tributes to the love we shared before it was poisoned by greed. Emma was right about one thing in her final letter. Love and evil can exist in the same person, directed at the same victims, but she was wrong about something else. Sometimes love wins,